Good evening and welcome back to Canadian Football Fanatics, and thanks everybody for tuning in to another BC Lions post-game show. Well, folks, this was not how I planned or envisioned the show going tonight. Number one, um, a absolute ugly one on behalf of the BC Lions. They absolutely put a miserable performance on display here tonight in Regina versus the Riders. They fall 39-8. They get absolutely their doors blown off in the biggest game of the year for themselves, Saskatchewan, for their playoff seeding, and just for some confidence going in. So before we get into it, folks, as always, like, comment, subscribe. I'll get us fired up here on Instagram. Appreciate everybody for tuning in here tonight because I know this is a tough one to talk about. It's going to be a tough one for me to stay um, from ranting for too long. I want to do this nice and quick because that one was a ugly one. This does not deserve, um, you know, it does deserve, I guess, some of our time because of how important it is. There's going to be a lot of talking points, but there's just this one is I sometimes kind of joke with Blake that sometimes these losses can be therapeutic post game shows where you can kind of come out on the other side and feel a little bit better about yourself and the team. This is not one. Tonight is going to be a very, very miserable post game show. So before we get going, I'm just going to share the links out on Instagram here quickly. I believe we should be good to go on Instagram. So I appreciate everybody for tuning in over there. If you guys are on Instagram or YouTube, let us know where you guys are tuning in from. If you're a Lions fan, if you're a Riders fan, how you guys are feeling after that one in the YouTube chat. As well, if you're over on YouTube, you might as well, if you're scrolling down in the chat, subscribe. When you guys subscribe, press the little notification bell. You guys get notified every time we go live on the channel. So that would be greatly, greatly appreciated. Give me just one more second here, folks, before we get into our post game. And as you can see, I am solo tonight. That is because Blake is unfortunately in Regina. He made the decision to go out and check out the game. I shouldn't be laughing because good for Blake for going out there, but unfortunately he witnessed a absolute ass whooping to the BC Lions tonight. Just I would imagine kind of ruins the whole trip home and just makes it a very long day. I know some of those feelings of coming home back on the ferry, not to the extent of having to fly over to Regina. So, wishing Blake nothing but the best. Safe travels, buddy. Hopefully, you're able to be back home and enjoy the rest of Thanksgiving with your friends and family back home. So, give me one more second, folks, because I got to find the link to share. Usually, I can do this when Blake's kind of rambling on and on. I shouldn't say rambling when Blake's doing his job. When I'm bouncing ideas off and then. Anyways, let's get going, folks. All shared. BC Lions postgame. Like last week, not going to be a traditional one where we go through quarter by quarter. We're just going to talk about some things that need to be talked about. Before we get into the big heavy hitters, which I know people are going to want to hear and get into probably first, but we'll save the Nathan Rourke quarterback discussion for a little bit later, as well as something that I think needs to be talked about as well within the coaching staff. So let's get into it. The BC Lions started out the game, and it almost should have been the writing on the wall right away with a interception on the second offensive play of the game for the BC Lions, and was returned for 6 for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. 3 plays in, and they were already up 7 points on the BC Lions thanks to a pass that was intended to William Stanback out into the offense's left flats. He ends up kind of bobbling it, and unfortunately goes off of his heel instead of the ground. Kind of a fluky situation, but at the end of the day, those things do happen. On the football field, crazy bounces like that do happen. It bounced off of, I believe, Roland Milligan was actually in the area. Could have been his 9th interception. He doesn't come down with the interception. I believe it was number 32, whose name is kind of not coming to mind right now, but he comes down with the interception, is able to make a move around Nathan Rourke, who didn't have the greatest angle, and then get into the end zone for the pick six, and was just I wouldn't say a nightmare start because they could get themselves out of the hole, but it was a almost worst case scenario where the Saskatchewan Roughriders win the toss, they defer to the second half, you get possession of the ball first, so you kind of need to make sure you at least take advantage of that. With Saskatchewan getting the opportunity to double dip going into halftime and getting the first possession of the second half, BC ends up a double negative. They give up possession and give up points as well. Second possession, BC takes over the possession of the ball once again, and it looked like Nathan Rourke threw his second interception on as many drives. Thankfully, it was reviewed and overturned. But that being said, that was, you know, like I said, it should have been almost a writing on the wall for for a little bit of the game. It kind of stayed close there in the first half. It felt like it was an attainable comeback, or it was attainable. But it was the game was still within our reach, and unfortunately, the Lions' offense outside of one drive that was capped off by David Mackey, um, quarterback sneak or fullback sneak, whatever we want to call it now. But the Lions' offense once again was inconsistent, was not efficient, was hurting themselves. A few, calls offensively, flags on them. Some just missed throws by Rourke, some drops, some just misreads, some silly play calls. I think of the one in the late in the first half where they had the ball third and two. They end up going for it. They end up going out of the gun. They end up handing it to David Mackey, who's a great short yardage quarterback, who's a fullback by position. So it's kind of just odd that if that was the play call, why we didn't have William Stanback. If not William Stanback, a guy like Jeshurun Antwi, who we just acquired, who's a bigger type, powerful running back, could have been used in a short yardage situation like that. David Mackey ends up getting stuffed. No, no personal shot at David Mackey, but just unfortunately he's the ball carrier in that given time. I'm sure if they had the same penetration, William Stanback's also getting met in the backfield. But just a puzzling decision by the BC Lions and Jordan Maximic. And overall, that was the only drive, or outside of that scoring drive, excuse me, the Lions offense was really just stagnant once again. We'll get into Nathan Rourke in a little bit and his numbers, but afterwards they don't look, I guess horrible would be the word, but they aren't um, um, great by any means. And we'll get into him later, like I said. But before we do, I think I just want to give a little bit of context by kind of going through some things that I think kind of hampered the team and the offense, I guess a little bit more specifically before we get into the bigger topic. But starting with, I think I guess maybe the play calling is probably number one. We'll start kind of opposite of how we did with, the bigger picture of this post game show. But Jordan Maximic, I think, has had himself a phenomenal. I believe it's could be 3 years now, 3 seasons, 4 seasons, 2021, 22, I believe, or it could have been actually 2022, 23, 24. This could be his third season as BC Lions offensive coordinator, if I'm not mistaken. And I think he's had a phenomenal 2 years prior to, where he's had two different quarterbacks. He's really developed his system around each the different skill sets and the different quarterbacks that they both are. And just give me a second here as I look up when he came over. 2020. So yeah, obviously 2020 was the COVID season. 2021 would have been the first season. So now in his fourth year, he's had a good 4 year tenure now with the Lions. I think this would be his first year that it's kind of been into question, and he's had some suspect games and some tough calls. And I think he needs to kind of find a rhythm here and help out some of his quarterbacks. Now that is, um, you know, tough situation because he's having to go change like his kind of mentality here on the fly with going from Vernon Adams Obviously, Chase Rice and Jake Delgado and some of the guys that had to step up there in the middle part of the season before Nathan returned to the CFL. Now Nathan coming back, so it is a hard transition. I do understand that, but I think he's kind of done a um, below average, I guess is probably the more appropriate word, job in terms of helping out his quarterback, getting some easy throws, the scripted portion of some of these games, like where the first few series are they have an idea of what they want to call and in some of these situations, and I'd like to see more from Jordan Maximic, and I think he was one of the more hot names to be possibly a head coach candidate with maybe we'll talk about that later. But I don't know if he's kind of maybe risen to the occasion as much as I'd like to. And if he was going to maybe go elsewhere on a head coaching opportunity, I would be opposed to that. But I wouldn't be too sure if I'd like him to be a replacement in BC if that was a thing. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Let's start with the offensive line number two, which is I think probably our biggest problem, which was not shown actually overwhelmingly tonight. I believe the Lions' offensive line only gave up one sack overall, which isn't terrible, right, by any means. But at the end of the day, I think this line has hampered them for too long. I believe dating back to probably the Jordan Maximic era started, even seasons prior to that. I think the Lions' offensive line has struggled to find a consistent level of play. I think they've they kind of I don't know if they retired Mike Riley early, but some of those seasons of the higher sack numbers and hits that he was taking, kind of banged him up, and I think maybe retired him early is kind of the right word, but it is kind of maybe in a question of how much longer did he have? Maybe was he already at an age where he was maybe should have already been retired because of his older age, but that's nonetheless they still kind of struggled as an offensive line. That was the problem kind of dating back to 2022, 2023 a little bit even as well. As more as and it wasn't just solely on the offensive line, but I think in some big games they've kind of let them down in terms of not being able to protect and obviously I think you can also probably chalk that up to playing on the road in playoff games, right? Where they're having to have the most communication on the offense, right? Where the offense can huddle, the receivers can kind of get their play call and then lock in downfield, and same with the quarterback can kind of lock in on his reads, stuff like that. The offensive line are kind of having to converse and kind of um, if say they're not a regular four down lineman, they have six guys on the line of scrimmage. They're kind of having to discuss who has who's picking up what guy, who's maybe the free rusher. Maybe the running back's having to hear what the certain pass production is as well. Maybe the quarterback even would like to hear. I would imagine as well, just to know kind of who's hot and stuff like that. And I would imagine he kind of has an idea off a certain amount of possibilities of what the line could be, calling or maybe staying in something like that. But I think the Lions' offensive line is been a position that they've needed to upgrade, and it's been unfortunate because I understand they have been trying to go, maybe skill position heavy is maybe the right word, but they've signed some of these guys to bigger contracts. Even both quarterbacks and OVA took a little bit of a discount to come back, but Nathan Rourke is going to be heavily paid. Alex Hollins is a top five receiver paid. Justin McInnis, I believe, is a free agent, if I'm not mistaken. This offseason, he's going to command a pretty good price range. Keon Hatcher obviously was paid pretty good. He ended up taking a pay cut after his Achilles injury, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it's going to be a tough ask and tough duty to whoever has those responsibilities. But the Lions have to, look into upgrading. Um, you know, it's unfortunate because there's no guarantee in change with changing out the offensive line, but at this point, I think you kind of hit your ceiling with this offensive line and kind of some of these guys and some of these players that are getting a little bit older now. Michael Couture, Suk Chung, Ken Perkins, Joe Broxton, obviously, I think is probably our best offensive line returning from injury. Wouldn't mind seeing him around. I think some of those younger guys, also Chris Slugger, Tyler Packer, maybe can stick around. There's some young guys on the roster, and you're probably tied to a Mike Couture contractually. But I think unfortunately for a BC guy like Suk Chung, it's maybe time for a change. He was the one that got beat specifically bad today on the sack. Just kind of stopped moving his feet and let the pass rusher right by him. Ended up stymieing a BC Lions drive that they had going, and I think that's one of their biggest problems offensively, starting with Max Simic offensive line, and then talking about I guess kind of getting into Rourke here a little bit is probably where we want to get to now in this conversation. Um, Within Rourke, before we get into Rourke more specifically, the receivers, and I think the lack of chemistry, the lack of, um, um, excuse me, everybody. It's late 7:20 on a Saturday night. I'm getting old, I guess. Um, no chemistry, no rhythm, no um, flow to the offense and to the receivers right now. It seems like uh, you know Nathan's um, not hitting them, in stride a lot of the time. Uh, we're having some drops and some timely opportunities. We're fumbling tonight. Justin McKinnis, although you could argue maybe that it wasn't, although it did get went to replay, did end up getting replayed or excuse me, ruled a fumble after replay. Uh, it's just the Lions' offense and their skill position players with Rourke don't seem to be on the same page, which is I think probably their arguably their biggest problem offensively. And I think that needs to, um, you know, it's only going to take time on task and work with them in a training camp setting. So that's why, I had a tweet today during the game that said, I have, I'm a firm believer that Rourke's going to be able or can get back to who he is as a player, what level that he was at in 2022. But I don't believe that, or I guess I'm not confident that it's going to be this season. Unfortunately, in a home Grey Cup opportunity where Amar Doman at the top wanted that more than anybody, and then everybody trickling down from there into the fan base as well. I think it might come at the cost of getting a Nathan Work back, and unfortunately, he's just not been able to get on the same page as his receivers and vice versa. The receivers just don't seem to be on the same page as well. Like I said on the preview with Blake, outside of Keon Hatcher, this receiving core has been pretty much unfamiliar with Nathan Work. Outside of Alex Holland's been on the practice roster. It's a lot of new faces, and it's going to take some time to get some chemistry, get some confidence in them, and it's just going to be interesting. So let's get into Nathan Rourke. Excuse me, everybody. 20 minutes in. And this quarterback controversy. I saw a friend of the show, friend of Blake and ours, Blake and I, Bobby, we reference him quite a bit, Guinness World Record holder, mentioned that he was interested on my thoughts on the QB controversy, which I um, credit Coach Campbell for starting that because uh, you know, dating back to Toronto when he quoted, he was quoted as saying he thought that the team needed a spark after Nathan Rourke led a touchdown drive to end the first half. He ends up going with VA in the second half for Toronto. They end up losing, which not saying that Nathan Rourke was going to be for sure, you know, pull the team back and come back, but it was just kind of open up a can of worms early on in that process after they lost, I believe, the first game to I forget. They went on a bye, and then I believe they played at Touchdown Pacific the following, and then had a win versus Montreal, and then I think the Toronto game followed that one, his fourth game back in the CFL, if I'm not mistaken. Just opened up a can of worms from there. And now after every halftime, Rick Campbell gets after in his halftime interview. Are you going to Vernon Adams? Are you going to Vernon Adams because the Lions offense hasn't looked the same since Montreal? Um, and every time he shot that down, and it's just puzzling because they kind of hung their hat on we signed off on bringing Nathan back. BA was going to be a part of this team and blah blah blah. But they tried to spew to the media and stuff like that, which was proven to be a lie up to this point. Because today, when the Lions are getting shit kicked in the fourth quarter, second half, there, Nathan gets pulled from the game, and Chase Bryce ends up coming third string quarterback. ends up coming into the game instead of Vernon Adams, who they're obviously protecting for a trade asset. Putting him into the game late in the fourth quarter, him getting hurt and tearing his knee up would be no good for trade related purposes this offseason. So Vernon Adams does not get put into the game, does not get to showcase himself or get to show that he is back to 100%, and is just a very big mess. I guess is probably the best way to put it. A mess that the Lions kind of have created now with this whole situation because they've made their bed. And I'm a firm believer in Nathan Rourke. I'm a big fan of Nathan Rourke. I'm a big fan of Vernon Adams as well. But I think this is unfortunately the business, and you made your bed with signing Nathan Rourke to the contract that you did long term, how much it is, and I think the kind of writing's on the wall. So sitting of Vernon Adams today isn't much of a surprise, but it's just such a you've kind of you've made your bed, now you got to lay in it. Like I mentioned about having to maybe sacrifice this season because Nathan's going to take this season to learn and get back up to speed. Hopefully, going into next year. It's unfortunate because it looks like he almost wasted a Vernon Adams MOP caliber type season the way he was getting off to returns from injury. If Nathan obviously it's kind of a whatever it's going to be return kind of put VA's return on the sideline or on the shelf for this season. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens this offseason. I think there isn't a QB controversy because the writing's on the wall, like I just mentioned, with the contract. Nathan Rourke's going to be their guy. There's a reason why they didn't pull him going into the second half, even though that I think the questions are very fair. Like there should have been questions with a caliber of quarterback like Vernon Adams, but with the way that you've kind of you've backpedaled, you've circled around this situation instead of from the beginning, you could have said, we respected everything Vernon Adams has done, but he's not going to be, considered until Nathan Rourke was to go down or something like that. But now the questions are going to be asked. It seems like there's just a weird dynamic. I know, I believe it's Britton or maybe it's Brett Gray. I forget his actual username that's on Twitter. Mentioned about he retweeted or reposted the picture of the video the Lions posted pregame with Vernon Adams kind of leading the pregame, hype, chant, huddle, and Nathan Rourke kind of standing there in the back, like all quiet, like Nathan Rourke is. And although I kind of that is who Vernon Adams is, and that's who his personality is. A very loud personality, a very likes to do that kind of stuff and lead by talking and stuff. Whereas Nathan is very much a quiet leader and kind of let his play do the talking more so than anything else. It's just a weird dynamic because it feels like that locker room still hasn't really transitioned over into Nathan's, and it's a tough thing to do in midseason, right? With VA still in the building, still dressing. It's just a weird dynamic that it doesn't happen too often in the CFL, and it's unfortunate that's going to come at the. I don't think at this point. I think I know at this point the Lions season is kind of. I think for me, Blake and I have both been pretty optimistic throughout this season. The struggles the last 10 or 11 weeks, whatever it's been now, and at this point, I think it's kind of sticking a fork in us. At this point, the season is over, in my opinion. Getting into third place and solidifying that from now on. We know we're going to either Saskatchewan Force and or Winnipeg, and then following that up, we're going to vice versa, Saskatchewan and or Winnipeg, depending on how the standings sit. I would imagine as of now, it looks like it's going to hold up as is, and we're going to go to Saskatchewan first and then Winnipeg second if we were to win. But at this point, I don't really have much hope in us going back into Saskatchewan winning. Their defense is good. This offense hasn't looked good at all. And this defense got abused all day long. So it's not a positive postgame, folks. It's not. There's a lot of time where I tried to squeeze the most out of a loss or something like that, or try to look on the brighter side of things. But this is far too long that this team has shown their true colors now, and this is who they are. They are just a inconsistent ball team. They haven't played 60 minutes all season long. for many, I would say almost a season and a half now, they haven't played. It could be even longer where they haven't played a full 60 minutes. And I think that goes to Rick Campbell, who, you know, let's talk about Rick Campbell. Let's talk about, Neil McAvoy. I think they have let down this organization in a big time way. Let's start with Rick Campbell, who, you know, I think is a good quarterback. Um, that being said, I don't, I don't know if I can fully even get on board with saying he's a, um, oh, sorry, guys. No, um, um, if he's a good coach. I've never been a big fan of Rick Campbell, to be honest. Um, this team has won a lot of games in his tenure for sure. But I feel like he is a lousy motivator. Talking to the press and what he gives to the media, some of the clips on PC Lions that they produce with the Error Up series, seeing him in the draft and stuff like that. His personality just seems very dry and very um yeah, like he just not dry, maybe is not the right word, but he doesn't seem like a guy that players would like to run through a wall for. Like, um, he's just seems very vanilla when it comes to that area. Uh, Now, obviously, the Lions have been blessed with quarterback play the last 3 years with Nathan Moore, Vernon Adams, and now BA coming in this year. Started off at a incredible pace, so has been blessed with quarterback play. Now we've kind of seen their true colors when the quarterback play has went down. And I think Shane, friend of both Blake and I's weekly show, on the week co-host on the weekly show with us, has mentioned early in the season something that we finally picked up on of his lack of being able to plan and prepare his team out of bye weeks. He's struggled dating back a long time in that area, and I think is a big time problem. So personally, I am out on the Rick Campbell era, and I made that I think a little bit clear coming into the season with my hot take of our season preview with Blake and I when the before the season even started, before week one even kicked off. Probably around the third week of preseason there, early June. Blake and I held a Wednesday night show. We did our predictions of who we got MOP and who's gonna finish first on the West and who's gonna go to the Grey Cup. Blah blah blah. We also did our biggest hot takes of the season. Mine was that if the BC Lions didn't reach the Grey Cup, Ryan Phillips will be taking over as head coach, and Rick Campbell would be out. I've never been a fan of Rick Campbell. I think he has kind of run his course. We've hit their ceiling. This Lions team has not been able to get the job done under Rick Campbell, and we need to hand the reins over into somewhere else. Now, he is also co-general manager, so he signs off on the roster and how the roster is unbalanced in some areas. We will now get into, I think, partially with Rick Campbell because the co-general manager tags Neil McAvoy, CGFL alum, a guy that I'm a fan of, a guy that I would still like to talk to on the podcast. But I think I have to be honest with myself and my listeners and viewers that are tuning in and watching the show. Um, I think they've they haven't been they've it's tough now, right? Because they've done good job in some areas, right? So, in pro sports, the draft and free agency is not a guarantee, and it's more kind of to compare it to like a baseball hitting percentage, right? Where hitting 300 or hitting 200 is pretty good, right? And if you're able to hit on maybe 2 out of 8 draft picks or something like that, or 2 out of every 2 drafts or something like that because the CFL is much different than the NFL draft. But free agency is also a little bit different. So if you're able to hit on, 1 or 2, like I said, free agents compared to the NFL, because the CFL free agency pool isn't as big, and bringing in as many impact players, because once you miss out on kind of the first few, there's not really a depth in terms of impact players in CFL free agency every year. I think they've struggled to, number one, the offensive line kind of replenish and try to upgrade that in any way. They've kind of stuck to their guns here and some of their guys that they believe in, which is fair to them. They've been loyal, but we've seen what that's got them because their offensive line struggled. The secondary, I think, in many ways has kind of failed it a little bit because they've ignored to upgrade that really outside of the draft as well, and letting go of a guy like Marcus Sales, who is on the other side now, doing pretty good for the Riders this season. I believe he has 4 interceptions. Um, was a guy that was pretty criticized, I think, during his BC Lions tenure, and showed shows now why he is a integral piece into a defense where he can do his role more often than not. Sure, he's going to get beat, but what he played for the Lions, I think he plays kind of a little bit more field corner for Saskatchewan. He played field halfback for BC. You're going to tend to get picked on some of those deep balls, and it's going to be hard because you're in a lot of space by yourself, especially when you're in man-to-man coverage, which Ryan Phillips is was like to do when he had some of those guys in their primes with TJ Lee, Gary Peters, who are still in their primes. Now they're getting older. Marcus Sales now is gone. GEC was playing at a higher level, I think, last season than he is right now. That being said, he is still, I guess, he had a few decent plays here tonight. I think of one specific pass breakup, but just the secondary, I think, overall hasn't been really improved. A guy like Lucas Pierre, they let walk, go to Edmonton and continue to be an all-star. And then the defensive line, I think, has been a little bit quiet. I know I kind of backpedaled a little bit with Matthew Betts last week after his 70-yard pick six, but he still reminds folks that he only has 1 sack, which he's going to be paid to do come this offseason. The Lions still don't have any guarantee he's going to be a Lion going into 2025 because we only signed him for the 7 remaining games. It looks like that's going to be a disappointment because he only has 1 sack, 1 game remaining. Yes, he has the pick six, but we pay him to get to the quarterback, and he's been quiet in that department. Same with the rest of the defensive line, where outside of Ben Hladic, who I think had the 1 sack on a blitz, the defensive line was held off the stat sheet in the sack category. Once again, should be, I think, a little bit better with some of those names on there, and they continue to underperform, underwhelm in the biggest game of the season, where I think some of those guys, yeah, there's been some positives with Christian Covington, Matthew Betts, like I just mentioned, the pick six. Sione Tiama has flashed at times. Jonah Tobias flashed at times. Tivo Tobias flashed at times. Josh Archibald, you name it. Everybody on that defensive line, Pete Robertson's flashed at times. But inconsistent at this time of year is just going to get you killed and going to get us eliminated in the playoffs. I think this management group, along with Rick Campbell and Neil McAvoy, needs to reevaluate themselves. And I question whether or not Amar Doman's the guy to kind of get that done, ruffle some feathers, and kind of this is my team, I own this. We're gonna restart and we're gonna go in a new direction. You guys haven't been able to get this done. We've hit our ceiling now the last 3 or 4 years here. You guys haven't been able to get us over the top and get us to winning the big game, winning a Grey Cup. So, you know, a lot to talk about, folks. My mouth's getting dry. I have no water in the room. I do not want to go too much longer, to be honest. We're going to talk about the defense a little bit, and then I'm going to get on out of here. The defense got annihilated, obviously, and they did not get helped out because the BC Lions defense, or excuse me, the BC Lions offense um, had 4 first half turnovers. I think they finished the game with maybe 6 or something like that. Let's see. Yeah, 6. 1 fumble, 2 interceptions, 3 turnover on downs. 4 in the first half. The Riders cashed in on 26 points off, or excuse me, 26 points, 17 off turnovers in that first half, and didn't look back from that point on. 26-8, I think, was the halftime score. The defense really just couldn't do nothing to stop them, and ultimately, the turnovers kind of cost them from there. 25 of 30, 271 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions for Trevor Harris. Just sliced and diced for majority of the night. 5 incompletions to Nathan's. Like I said, didn't have horrible numbers, but didn't have good numbers by any means either. Kind of right in the middle, especially with some of those interceptions where he had two. The first one wasn't his fault. The second one you could argue maybe was 15 to 23. Not bad, right? Eight incompletions, 200 yards, not bad as well, but not able to do anything under or over 200 yards in basically 3 quarters of play isn't as efficient, especially in the CFL game. And the 2 interceptions isn't efficient with 0 touchdowns. Who I believe he hasn't thrown any touchdowns in the last 4 games, which is just not very good. William Stanback isn't able to get involved when you're getting blown out. I think he only had 8 carries. Had some drops issues. Obviously, I mentioned the first uh, points of the game. First interception that was pick six was off his hands, off his foot, and then into the arms of the Riders defender. Defensively, I know talked about it. D line, no pass rush whatsoever. Christian Covington, unseen. Matthew Betts, unseen. Pete Robertson was seen, but for the wrong reasons. Got called for a horse collar. Argue maybe it wasn't. Shioni Tama, not really heard from. Jonah Tobai, unheard of. Unheard from. Ben Hladek had the 1 sack. Linebackers now. AC Lee kind of, had no, it wasn't even AC Lee. Roddy Varga had a pass breakup early in the game. He's getting, played a little bit on rundowns when they want to be a little bit heavier. And, just not much to be said, folks. DBs didn't play great either. Everybody got targeted. It was bad. TJ Lee getting targeted. Gary Peters, TJ Lee, you name it. Manny Rugamba, GEC. Everybody was getting targeted. Everybody was getting completions caught on them. It was not a good night. And honestly, I don't know where to go from here. Like I said, there's not really much positive way to spin this, guys. I think this is a post-game show where I'm sticking the fork in the BC Lions this season. I do not believe they're going to be able to have a Cinderella-type season. I mentioned with Shane as well on Twitter here tonight where I don't think they're going to be a 2019 third-place Winnipeg Blue Bombers team who went on a run in the Western playoffs, went on to win the Grey Cup, and I just don't see it with this Lions team. That being said, on any given Saturday or Sunday, whenever playoffs are going to be had, you never know. But I am not going to have much confidence in that going forward. So, not much more to be said, to be honest, guys. I will just pay the bills if that's what we want to do here with the Rouge 51. The Rouge 51. The Rouge brought to you by Area 51. This is their composite football at Area 51 Sports for all your football equipment needs. That is, helmets, pads, pants pads. So like your, thigh pads, your hip pads, your tail pad, your knee pads, your, blocking pads, your shed pads, you name it. They got it. They have, apparel for, coaching and players, sweaters and shirts and stuff like that, shorts. They have also, the 7-on-7 uniforms, stuff like that. So all your football needs, they have it. Helmets, you name it. Go check out their many catalogs over at area51.com. All the good people over there. We appreciate you guys. You can assure we will have some content out in your guys, with your guys, Rouge composite football very, very soon. So, guys, other than that, the BC Lions get absolutely smacked in the mouth tonight, 39-8 in Regina to the Saskatchewan Roughriders. They fall to 8-9 on the season. 1 game left at home versus Montreal Alouettes. I think Mark Doman probably did it on purpose because he knew what was coming down the pipe, which we should have probably known going in. That being said, I still pick the BC Lions. I will not be that. I will not be that dumb. You can hear it here first, folks. I will pick Montreal going into Wednesday this week for the final game of the season. This BC Lions team is just dead in the water. I have no faith in them. for nothing else than to you know, just go against them so that, you know, maybe, just maybe, they get a victory because they spite me this year that much and want to finish 500 on the year, which would just be absolutely disgusting. 9-9 on the season, the BC Lions. But other than that, like, comment, subscribe, guys. That was very, very painful. I'm not gonna lie. I always say that this could be therapeutic, but doing it solo without Blake, number one, doing it after a absolute ass kicking, and the way that this, you know, they just had no show, no heart. Just was a very, um, very tough one. Very, very tough one to get motivated for. A very tough one to spin this any positively going forward, because I think this team is dead in the water. Like I said, I think I would kind of put it in pen. Don't put it in pencil that they got 2 games remaining. They got a one more week 20 game versus Montreal, bye week, West semifinal, likely versus Saskatchewan in Saskatchewan. And I think they're gonna um, get what they deserve, I guess, in that one, and it won't be good. So, like, comment, subscribe. Like I just said, when you guys subscribe, hit the little notification bell. You guys will get notified every single time we go live here on the channel, or upload any sort of video, like the preview video, Canada West weekly show. That'll be back next week with the Canada West beginning again, starting back up again after the Thanksgiving break. And we only have 2 weeks left in the regular season, guys. So 2 more weeks of regular Wednesday night editions of the CFF weekly show. And then we'll get into the playoffs. And then that's only 3 more weeks after that, guys. So winding down here in the season, a little over a month of Wednesday night shows left. Who knows how long we have BC Lions postgame shows, but we will be back here, win or lose, next week, next Saturday, when the BC Lions host the Montreal Alouettes. So lastly, if you guys are on Instagram tonight, follow us. If you guys are not, or if you guys are on YouTube, head over to our Instagram at Canadian Football Fanatics. Give us a follow. We're, I think, over 1,100 followers over there. X Twitter, we're not doing as good. I think we're only around 100 to maybe 200. So go over there at _CF Fanatics. You guys can find us and all of our content on social media, those two social media platforms. So have a good Thanksgiving weekend, guys. And we'll see you guys on Wednesday night.